Welcome to C2 Biz Growth Iron Sharpens Iron podcast, where CEOs and entrepreneurs share how they are overcoming business growth and sustainability challenges.
Welcome to the C2 Biz Growth Iron Sharpens Irons podcast, where CEOs and entrepreneurs share how they're overcoming the business growth and sustainability challenges. I'm your host, John Hale III, and we're excited that you're joining us today. And we have our guest speaker, CEO, Mr. Norman Ireland. We're excited that he's here with us. He's going to talk about his journey from New York City and Queens to serving in global business roles and all the way back to the United States, and also a transition from an engineer to a CEO and a leader with a 21-year plus track record. Welcome, Norman, to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, John. I'm so happy to be here. I'm really excited for our conversation.
Yes, so am I. We got to know each other. So I kind of just wanted to start with a question, Norman. We see how you're showing up with us today. Again, being a president for 21 years, successful, built teams, led teams, dealt with partners, capital partners, managing partners, etc., which is really impressive, especially in the software field, the software technology field, just giving the cutthroat competition that you've had to deal with, particularly in the federal government sector. But also wanted to kind of take a step back. We see how you show up today. But could you maybe give us a story or two, or just tell us about just some experiences from you when you first started this journey, or something from your childhood that it really has shaped who you are today?
Sure. Yeah, I would say I'm shaped, John, by two places, interestingly, both named Jamaica.
Okay.
One is I was born in Kingston, Jamaica.
All right.
And so, that upbringing from the first 7 years of my life really helped me to understand how important education was, how important collaboration was, integration. As you know or may know, the credo of Jamaica is out of many, one people. It's written on our flag. It's not something, and I can say in contrast to what's happening in the U.S. today, it's not something that you can rip away. It's not part of the Constitution. It is the Constitution of the country. And so it's part of the people.
So it's kind of in the DNA of the people, of being born there, raised there. That's just, you can't take the helix of your DNA and just unwind it. So that's part of.
Exactly. It's part of who we are. It's the immigrants. Everyone there is an immigrant. Everyone there came from, whether it was Africa or Southeast Asia or Northern Asia. They're Chinese, they're native ethnic Chinese, they're ethnic Indians, they're Jamaicans, they're Arawak Indians, and we all blended into one people. And so as you travel around, and I happened to be there yesterday, so I just came back.
All right.
Yeah. And visiting family and so forth. But that instilled in us, how to get along and collaborate. Mm-hmm. Because, and many of your listeners may have been there and traveled and say, it's always no problem. And
one love, man. One love,
exactly. And so that's how, I was raised. And when we came to New York, we moved there. My whole family immigrated and moved to New York and moved to Brooklyn at that time. And we started really working with the entire community and being part of the community. And I remember my dad and I would walk, at that time we had no car, but it's New York, it's probably a liability, but we walk everywhere and see everyone and just wave and so forth. But that kind of collaboration, is how I try to work in my business. And that's how I work with our staff and our partners and our clients, to try to instill that sense of collaboration and family and unity. Because like you, I know that the only way to get things done, large scale items done, is with partners, people, as building great teams. So that's where it's
for sharing that. No, that is fantastic. And we will definitely come back to that. I got a couple of questions as we go through here, and we'll definitely come back. Just as an immigrant here, the opportunities you see that sometimes some of us that are native born don't see those, or we take for granted, or we overlook. But to set the context for the further conversation, tell us about the company One Touch Federal that you're the president of. What are your products and services, and what challenges do you solve for your customers?
Yeah. So back in 2003, my business partners and I started a small technology company, and my business partners were from Price Waterhouse and other startups, and so they brought into the organization and the environment an understanding of human capital. They understood HCM, and myself and a couple of other folks were the technologists, and we understood telecom. We understood the internet. We had cell phones and email addresses before anybody we knew had those things going far back. And so when we met, though, the human capital guys understood immediately the power of the internet. I'm taking you back, maybe it's 20 something years. We showed up and spoke to, I know you, John, strong financial guys, so got the CFO mindset. And we would talk to somebody like you, your credentials and your expertise. But as you know, the person responsible for the money is also pretty much responsible for the risk. And so when they would hear from us that we have a payroll system and it runs in the cloud, in the internet, they would look at us like, you guys have 8 heads. What are you doing in my office? I'm about to throw you out. Because I never heard such foolishness. So we had some convincing to do to help folks understand back then in the early 2000s the power of the internet and the trajectory and where it was going.
Gotcha.
So that was fun.
Right.
Those were interesting times.
Yeah, no, they are. They are trying to explain something to someone that doesn't quite exist yet, or at least is not commercially viable enough that they understand it, they touched it, they used it, how it works, and you want how much money for what? Who's going to buy and use this? Because I don't know it. Most people with money think that they're the smartest people that they've ever met. That's another challenge to always overcome.
That's very true.
To get them comfortable enough to invest. I guess you've gotten good at letting them think that they're the smartest person in the room.
Yeah, and in fact, I would say, just kind of pivoting to that a little bit, we had to raise money. We had a great idea of taking payroll and human capital, or HR at that time, to the cloud, and we certainly did not have the funds to do that, to do all the work necessary, nor the infrastructure. We knew it existed, but some of the things that we had to do is go out and talk to people about how fundraise. We got some angel investors. There's some folks who are still with us, in fact, who invested, who believed in us, invested in the technology.
So Norman, can I ask you a quick question? So these are people from the early 2000s that are still with you today?
They're still with us today. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Right.
Well, that says a lot about your business, your success, because clearly if they weren't getting a return, they would have been long gone, or the return that they wanted to get, and they didn't see this. It's 2 things, right? You get the return that you expected to get, then there's always the opportunity cost that the angel investor could say, hey, I could liquidate cash out here and go invest someplace else. So it says that it speaks a lot to you and your team and your leadership in this, the success of being able to return money. And I tell clients and companies all the time is investors want to know how they're going to get paid back. So that says a lot, that they're still with you.
Yes. Yeah, that absolutely does. Yeah, there's a lot of trust and great relationships that have been built over time. And, again, the things that the work that I've done with you, I'm very comfortable with your background, that the value of investing in those relationships.
Definitely.
What it brings to you long term.
Definitely. So another thing I want to discuss, kind of pivoting right on that, is what was the value proposition of One Touch in the early stages, and what did the angel investors see, or what did you communicate to the angel investors about the value proposition as you're beginning?
So back then, clients had different challenges. The challenge was that most of the problems that organizations wanted to solve, or most of the challenges, if you will, that they had, and so that they wanted to solve, were operational. They weren't able to move as quickly as they wanted to. They weren't able to organize. They didn't have the transparency or the visibility of the resources. Who's working what hours on what day, and how much am I paying them? Right? Just some simple questions like that. So those were the challenges that needed to be solved, and we knew they could be solved technologically if we put together the right components of a system. But every organization was a little different. And so when we would go and talk to them, our large competitors would say, here's the solution that we have, and you can use it or not, was effectively the message. Because they were billion-dollar companies. We were not. So we would walk in and say, tell us what you need. And they would say, we don't know what we need. And we would say, okay, give us all your spreadsheets, because that's how they were running their operations. And they would say, what do you mean all of our spreadsheets? I mean, then we would talk to them and we would say, well, how do you record time? So we use a spreadsheet. Okay, give us that. How do you ensure that this project is not underwater? How do you make sure it's profitable? Oh, we use a spreadsheet. Okay, give us that. And so on and so forth. You get the idea. And then we would take the spreadsheets and we built a tool that was flexible enough to handle all of these varying spreadsheets. And we would go back to them and say, okay, here's the information, or here's the tool. And they would say, well, what do we do with this? You put the information right here, just like you would in your spreadsheet. And they're like, okay. And that's how we grew the business. We grew the business by talking to really smart people who didn't know how to take the technology and apply it. And we would do that for them. So we were their IT, or if you will, their application development arm.
Understood. And so that value proposition moves us all the way to the day. And over the years, then, how have you guys, in this evolving market of software technology, the cloud is clearly here now, et cetera, data centers, how do you stay on top of your game in that market with all the competition that you have today? If we kind of fast forward.
Interestingly, much of the strategy hasn't needed to change, meaning every organization still has challenges. Every organization still wants to move faster. Every organization I know wants to be more profitable, and wants to bring more of that top line revenue to the bottom line. So the challenge of the organization or the goals haven't changed, but how we go about it changes. And so there's a lot of discussion. As obviously AI didn't come up in the first 20 minutes, but it's probably going to be the conversation we have for the rest of our discussion. But prior to artificial intelligence, there's the concept of business intelligence, or how I use the information I already have in a more productive way. And so that's how our application development teams are working with client information and with what's happening in the market, meaning new technologies. And we're marrying both of those together.
Gotcha. And so then, as you're growing and scaling your business, how do you keep the culture? How do you keep the team together? You mentioned very important to you, the culture, teamwork. So I'm sure there's a certain type of leader that you need to have characteristics, because not all leaders will have that certain type of technologist or engineer that you need as well. So how do you have the culture, and how have you maintained that as a company and grown, and maybe even some of your customers have gotten bigger?
Yeah. It's a great question. And I think there are two things that, I try to do and have not outsourced. And so, as one of the leaders of the business, I ensure that I interview everyone. We are not hiring people without my touching those people as they come in the door, to ensure that they understand and they've bought into what's the value that we want to deliver, and does that person want to be part of the team that delivers that? In other words, it isn't just about my interviewing them, it's about them interviewing me. And so I want them to understand the vision, any candidate to understand the vision and so forth. Now, obviously, we're filtering down to the last couple of people. We're looking at any particular slot. So we happen to be a small company still in that growth phase. So that's number one. Number two is there is a lot of talent that we have in our organization that goes untapped. Mm. And I'm constantly looking to grow the folks internally, because I think a lot of the people in general, and certainly the folks who we have, don't necessarily know how good they can be. They know what they do, they know what their vision is, but they don't necessarily know beyond that. And so, I think about some of the folks who I admire. I remember as a young child, I was reading Sports Illustrated, and I read about this team in California, and I was a kid in New York. And at that time, California seemed, gazillion miles away, and how they were winning every single year this NCAA basketball championship. And I said, who is that guy? And so read about John Wooden and how he led, young men, not much older than I was, to decades and decades of championships. And he said he did that because he was able to encourage them to join his program and just do the best they can. He said, but most people don't know what the best they can looks like. And so his job was to help them grow beyond what they ever imagined was their best.
Outstanding. So a couple of lessons there are, number one, you interview everybody that comes through the door. And I love what you said as well, kind of having a level playing field where they're interviewing you as well in the company, because they need to know that here's the vision, here's what we're doing, here's how we do it, and that they need to buy into that as well.
Exactly. Right. It needs to meet their values, right? Our values, they need to come together, not just so if they don't buy into the values, they're not going to work as hard for themselves as well as for the business.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's outstanding. A lot of CEOs can take the time to be able to do that, and that kind of helps communicate the importance of that priority to the team. If you're taking time out of your busy day, busy week to actually sit down, and obviously there's a smaller list of, like you said, candidates for any given position, but it's important enough that you're prioritizing your time. So I think sometimes, Norman, we look at what our priorities are, and time is one of the only things we can't get back. You can break or lose different things. You can buy something new. If you lose it, someone takes it, etc. But time is our most important asset. So that says a lot for your leadership, but for the manager, for everyone else on the team, and the people coming in the door.
That's exactly right. And I'm going to share this thought as well. If you allow me to
go ahead,
talk for another couple of minutes about this. I think we've shifted as a society, at least in this country. We've shifted to where it's all about the quality of the people's creativity. And let me say a little bit about that. We hire good people. You hire good people. A lot of folks hire great people. Can you make them creative? Can you allow them to be creative? And can you allow them to solve problems the way that they want? That involves a lot of trust. That involves a lot of listening, because we're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. And so, so I think about how do we encourage that spirit of, look, this is a team. We're all going to make mistakes. Let's move fast, right? Let's try to solve problems very, very, very quickly in the way we do it. And in some ways do it differently than we did it last time, right? And so how do we trust each other to get to that point, right? That starts in the first interview. And that's why I get involved right at the ground floor.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for sharing. That's fantastic. And as we're talking about being in the growth phase and still moving forward, could you share with us a bold move that you've made or a calculated risk that's paid off for the company?
Yeah, there was a time, there's several, but there was a time when we wanted to enter into the benefits administration business. It's a segment of human capital management that's very specialized because it deals with insurance companies, healthcare. So those are third rails, right? 2 third rails. And it meant understanding that. And we said, we don't understand any of that, but our clients need that. So let's partner with companies who do understand that. And frankly, we did not succeed in getting them to buy into a vision of an integrated offering. And what we ended up doing was we said, you know what? How do we get a partner who truly understands the client? And so we ended up buying a benefits consultancy. And so we purchased a company that was a service-oriented company, and we were technology guys, and we had an office, kind of a U shape. They were on one side of the, so there was Athens and Sparta. We were Sparta on the other side. And whenever we had questions, we'd bring them over and we'd say, okay, explain to us this concept. And they would talk to us for hours and hours about that. And we would say, okay, thank you. And we would go off and build a really creative solution to what they just explained were the challenges in that part of the business. And then so that was a 2-year effort, huge investment of time, resources, but it got us to a fantastic application that we were then able to bring to other agencies and even insurance companies. We ended up partnering with some billion-dollar insurance companies in that space.
That's fantastic. So it says a couple of things to me. One is a couple of them didn't work, so you kept going. But second, the life cycle to develop the product took a couple of years. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, that's
Yeah. Right. And so that's something to think about from developing your software, your technology, then getting it to market is bringing me to another question I had. What's the mix or balance between investing in new innovations, tools, technologies? We can talk about, AI in the back end, just something that everyone's starting to use. But when you're developing it in-house and then kind of look at the sales life cycle for how do you gauge the ROI, the benefit, the CAC, customer acquisition cost?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Yeah. There are so many aspects of investment when it comes to technology, and you're doing all of them continuously. And just to kind of go through your list, and add some, you're constantly investing in how do I lower my customer acquisition cost and increase the retention, right? Both of those. There's two different challenges, but you're constantly investing there. How do I acquire new customers? Not just the ones that look like the ones that I have, but the ones in adjacent markets. So how do we break in there? How do we leverage the technology that we don't currently have? Right. For example, let's go back to the artificial intelligence and say, hey, a few years ago before ChatGPT, nobody really honed in on what a chatbot was. But, those are things that we had to invest in. So how much do I allocate over there? And for what reasons? And then there's some operational investments that we're making all the time in technology. Other organizations, if a school wants to add a program, they need to add teachers. If a technology company wants to solve a challenge that it has, we add more technology. So if we've got a customer issue, we can solve it with people in the short term, but really the solution that we always opt for is how do we solve it technologically. So we're constantly investing in our business, and we have been for decades.
And so what, I don't know if there's kind of a lessons learned, what would you share with other CEOs in the technology space, technology development, software space, in terms of that cycle? Is there a balance? Is there a mix? It sounds like it's 24/7, 365. That's always what you're going to do because your competition is doing it and your customers are demanding it. How do you find that mix and that balance, you and the team?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there is a balance and a mix, but that balance and mix are always changing. And you go through the phases and the life cycles. And so this one that we're in right now, 2025, we're talking here in February 2025. It's all about AI. It's all about how do I take the data I have and infuse it with the intelligence brought about by, this large language model or LLM and bring that to the client, because the clients are going to see immediate and tremendous uptick in the usage of the software, because it makes it so much easier when I can ask a question either with text or verbally. Prior to that, there were years when we spent 80% of our investment dollars fixing operational items so we could scale, addressing performance areas so we could scale. So some of it is startup. You've got to have a startup scale up mindset. And it's those two levers that you're constantly balancing, whether you're in startup mode or scale up mode. And every business is that. Even the mature ones are looking at some aspect of the business as startup and some aspect as scale.
Yeah, I talked with a friend the other day who's in a larger cap company, and they're talking about innovation. And my satire was, no, your innovation is you have an internal M&A department. You're going out buying innovations. How much you're really creating organically, or how much you look in the marketplace, see where the gaps are you have. Look over the next horizon. How are we going to get there? You can develop it, or you can go find some smaller, younger company, and you can just buy it, buy the company, buy the engineers, et cetera. So we had a real good laugh about that. But you're right. That's very interesting. We're either in scaling or startup mode. And so that creates a lot of need for management and leadership dexterity, I'd imagine.
And I think it's great insight, for you and your friend who you're chatting with, that their company understands that they do scale up well. So I need to buy the startup so I can scale it.
Right. No. You've got a team of technologists, engineers, program managers, probably some finance folks, et cetera, folks on the branding, marketing side that are just drooling and ready to grow and scale up the next company. That's fantastic. Yeah, I want to pivot a little bit just to we talked about AI that's here. I think is always going to be here. There are other trends or things that are happening in the marketplace, in the industry, be it in the CHM world, software world where you are, or maybe even, I know you do a lot of work with the federal government. Are there trends there that you're excited about, looking forward to?
Yeah. The most exciting trend for us out of separate from artificial intelligence, but really it's part of the Venn diagram, is customer experience, is CX. Customer experience is...
One second, no, you just have to love the acronyms, right? HCM, CX, yes, we all live in acronyms. That's a good deal. I got you.
That's right. Yeah, and I'm in DC, so I should have apologized.
Yes, the town of acronyms, yes.
Right.
It's all good. Okay, so CX is customer experience and HCM is human capital management. I'm sure folks have caught on by now.
Okay. Right. And yes, and thank you. And so,
no problem.
And to simplify for everyone or clarify, what's customer experience? Well, it's how you, as a client or user, interpret the product. And I say, or I should say, because that customer experience work that we're doing on the technological side is thinking about every role, every responsibility, and how they interact with what we have, and how do we simplify and streamline it and bring to it more value than you could have imagined. All right. And so, let me give you an example. As you know, we're in the boomer age, right? And so what does that mean for a business and human capital? Lots of retirements, lots of folks who are looking, they're reaching retirement age and they're thinking through what retirement looks like, which means I'm thinking through, when am I going to retire? What will I earn when I retire? What does my package look like? What does it look like now? Do I have any obligations in the existing company that would, if you will, change the date of when I can leave? So on and so forth. There are lots of questions and certainly items to talk with their spouse. The client said, I want a retirement calculator that looks like the one you can get on the Social Security Administration site. So they went over, looked at that and said, that's our solution. And we said, thank you. Appreciate that you need this. And thank you for giving us a model of what's, really important to you. And when we looked at it, we came up with a whole different set of questions about what would make for a good customer experience, not just what was answered in this kind of rote, Social Security way. And so we built them a tool, or designed a tool that allows them to not only see what they would earn, but to see what they wouldn't earn if they separated. In other words,
the opportunity cost.
Yeah, because there's so much flexibility in when they can go, and folks are living longer and so forth. We're factoring into the technology and the application all of these human elements that are not being factored in other places. And so we're bringing them and giving them a holistic tool, which takes the customer experience from something very simple to something really complex, but we present it simply. And so we're seeing huge adoptions there, and kudos.
Well, fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. I'm sure from the company standpoint that perhaps you clearly over-delivered that example, and that could benefit them in the eyes of people that work for them, in terms of their employees, that they have this tool that sounds very novel that they may not be able to get someplace else. I mean, they start talking to other colleagues, other companies, and other companies are going to have something like that.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is with all of the capabilities now of AI, one of the areas where you apply it is internally in a software development shop. And so it ends up being that it didn't take longer to develop and deliver a more sophisticated solution. right? It could take the same amount of time or less time to deliver that solution because the tools that we use now are so much more advanced than they were in the past.
Yeah, and that's a great point, in terms of the speed to market, that the product life cycle of going from thought customer, you bring it in house and get it back to the customer. And also, what about the cost in that case? Is the technology, does that more engineers, or does the technology help you do it same costs, or could you get something quicker to market with actually less costs?
It's the latter. We're getting products and solutions, applications, I call them. Time to market is now, we're reducing that. Instead of years, it's months. Instead of months, it's weeks. And so we're looking and delivering on these application requirements faster with the same staff and better tools.
Gotcha. Related to that, in terms of the HCM, human capital management, there's been a lot of talk, probably will be for a while, coming out of COVID. Is just a work environment? Is it 100% return? Is it hybrid? Studies have shown that some form of hybrid, maybe employees and staff are most productive, maybe a little bit more control of their time, flexibility. But is that created opportunities for you, or has it made your work more complex, as in terms of companies from human capital management and work that you do for companies, clients?
Yeah. It's a great question. And there's so many answers. I feel as if depending upon what your organization looks like is going to drive the answer. For us and for our clients, there are two different answers. We're a small company with a strong culture, tight core. We can be 100% remote without any loss in productivity. We didn't see any dip. And in fact, now I would say we're seeing a lot of speed and output growth. So for us, it's extremely positive. For some of our clients, they did experience a dip. We saw it in the number of transactions. They use our systems to run transactions. We can see it in the counts. And so we know, numerically, the data doesn't lie in these cases. And so our advice to them was, it could be that some of the business processes need to be re-engineered and improved. And so there's some BPR efforts that we've seen organizations undertake, and that's brought them value.
And that's business process re-engineering?
Business process re-engineering, yes.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so going forward, what we believe will happen is hybrid work will continue. Businesses will execute business process re-engineering efforts to allow for no loss of productivity, whether folks are working at home and or in the office. And so that will be seamless. So for technologists like us, it's how do I bring to life their vision of seamless business processes, whether you're in the office or hybrid or 100% remote.
Gotcha. Oh, thank you for sharing that, particularly from your standpoint of playing the role as big brother. In certain cases, you can count our clicks and know how productive we are or we are not in certain days, certain environments, etc. So
Right.
now we know who to, we have concerns about that. We know who to go to. What's kind of a little bit more of a personal question here is, you've been doing this for a while. I joked, you corrected me that you were on a 1-year contract that's 5 years. Now you're going to be in a 1-year contract that's 25 years. So thank you very much for that, client, and in the other work that you're doing. But as you look at your own career, kind of the arc of it, what would you say your superpower or superpowers are, and when did you discover them?
That's a really challenging and very good question. It took a long time to understand that it wasn't what I had initially thought, which was I'm educated as an engineer. So I was writing software when I was 16 years old. And my first job out of school was with a very large international business machines company, not to use the acronym, not name that anymore. They use the acronym, so I won't. And I was writing software. And then I moved to the business side. And so I all along thought my superpower was the ability to speak with developers and other technicians and to speak with the business side, understand what the business side needs, communicate that to the development team back and forth, and so on and so forth. And that took me internationally. But when I started working internationally and then back in the U.S., back domestically, what changed for me was how I perceived my skill set. And my superpower came out of that, and it's listening. And not just listening in a passive way, but listening in a culturally aware and sensitive way. And so, back to my upbringing, and now, I can see the blend of how being in a multicultural environment, and here really in business, I'm in very many multicultural environments. The business guys, finance guys, and tech guys, those are three different cultures.
Languages.
And languages, exactly. And so I believe my superpower is listening. And then it's married with being a doer, being a problem solver. When I had a recommendation from the dean of engineering from my undergraduate school, his first sentence was, "Norman is a doer." I was 18 years old. And so I go back and I read that. I get goosebumps and chills. How did he know? That was what I was 18. I didn't know anything about that. So I'm not sure if it was more of a direction. Hey, go do this, or this is who you are. And I'm telling you, because it's going to be hard for you to see it for some time. But he was clairvoyant enough to see it.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, one of the two, so thank you for your time today. I wanted to wrap up one last question. I started bringing the beginning back to where we are now, and you kind of touched on it. Being born and raised in Jamaica, I think you came here at 7 or 8, so when you immigrated here, what particularly do you think it is about being an immigrant that you think has, propels or drives you, or maybe where you see opportunities where some of us who are native born here in the States may just miss, and then just weave into that kind of then, what's next for you and what's next for One Touch?
Yeah. I was very lucky, and I am very lucky. To say, as you said, I was born in Jamaica, and I mentioned there were 2 Jamaicas. Well, we ended up moving from Brooklyn to Queens to Jamaica, Queens. And so, and at that time, and still now, Jamaica, Queens is also very multicultural. And so I came from one, really nice tasting soup with some, maybe some Scotch bonnet peppers, to another one with also some great flavors. And so I learned a lot in those formative years, going to elementary school and middle school and high school in New York. And that helped to craft this, my ease, if you will, with how I can interact with all different kinds of people and feel comfortable in my skin in doing that. And so that's helped me tremendously on the business side. What I also brought about was the creativity of Americans in general. Whereas you get certain kinds of creativity on a smaller island like Jamaica, you have different creativity. There's a lot more risk that I think Americans take in general, because they believe in themselves and believe it's going to work out. And it's that belief that I've adopted as well, that our risks are going to pay off. And Americans are very positive. If you really think about and compare, you don't find an American who says, "I'm not going to make it." I think the American spirit is, "I'm going to make it. You might try to stop me, but I'm going to make it." And so adopting that is also, that's also part of me. So,
well, thank you for sharing that. That is fantastic. And I think that's an opportunity for other leaders and other CEOs to look at internally what strengths that they have. In particular, I love the journey about it took you later in your life, in your career, to figure out this is, I have strong skill sets and expertise, but in terms of superpower, this is what I'm tapping into. And I think you're right. I'm not the first one who's ever said this, but God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? We should do more listening than talking, but I love the way you put that. Being an active listener, I think, is a skill set that we can all try to develop more on. Because again, that will attune us to people on our team that we have to manage and lead, as well as to what our customers want, and not what we want for them, but what do they want.
Exactly.
And I think when you're listening, like your comment earlier as a leader to your team, when you're listening, you can see, hey, there's more in this person that he or she realizes on my team, because what you're listening, you're looking at a bigger picture. They're looking where they are now. So I think those are all great leadership things to share.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So we want to officially welcome you to the C2 Biz Growth Iron Sharpens Iron family, Norman. So you're here. I would love to have you back, but we want to thank you for your time. We appreciate it, and best wishes and good luck to you in the rest of 2025.
Thank you, John. I'd love to. This was a great conversation. I really appreciate it. Love to be back anytime.
All right. Thank you, Norm.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the C2 Biz Growth Iron Sharpens Iron podcast. And check us out on social media, share, and subscribe.